we take global business updates. And Rotus Oddiri joins us now. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. I support Rufai. We do need those implications. Congratulations to the Arise team. Good morning to Ayo.
Good morning
to Rufai.
Yeah,
good morning to all our viewers. Welcome to Money Monday. Let me quickly rifle through this. I really want to get to Nigeria. Quickly, oil prices, not much to discuss here. It's still range bound, $73 for Brent, $68 for West Texas. We are expecting OPEC's decision for production. On those production cuts, we get them on Thursday. We're supposed to get it yesterday. They moved it. So Asian markets are in the green, led by China. About 112 basis points is what you're seeing there for the Shanghai Composite Index. You see, Japan, the Kospi in Korea, Hang Seng, they're all in the green. Mostly, China is leading because of the Caixin S&P Global Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, coming in at 51.3 for November. Estimates were, I think, about 50.3. October was about 50.5. So when you're above 50, you are expanding. If you're below 50, you are contracting. Doesn't mean that China's economy is not still in trouble. Mostly smaller manufacturers are the reason why we got that. Let's get to India. India's second quarter GDP figures, we previewed this last week. They were released on Friday. They disappointed, coming in at 5.4%. You will see FY 2025. India's fiscal year starts in April, so their own second quarter is July through September, as opposed to April, May, June for us who start from January. Basically, manufacturing disappointed, private consumption disappointed, inflation is still stubbornly high, and the government needs to do more spending. So 5.4% are the numbers that we got for the second quarter in India. I think this is lowest we've seen in about 7 quarters. So disappointing markets everywhere. India is part of BRICS. As you know, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. We had that summit earlier on this year. Donald Trump has threatened. I was waiting for when Trump would talk about BRICS. He's always giving us content on the business side. So Trump, over the weekend, has threatened BRICS with 100% tariffs. As always, his area of communication or channel of communication is Truth Social. So on the Truth Social post, he said the era of BRICS undermining the US dollar is over. They need to commit to the almighty US dollar, and if they don't, they will be levied with 100% tariffs. So we'll see how things work out there. To Nigeria, I wanted to, of course, you all have been talking about, taxes. And shout out to Dr. Abate. I don't know how he does it. He had a tax conversation on Saturday for over an hour. He had This Day Live on Sunday, which all of you should watch every Sunday at 4 p.m. on top of what he does on the morning show. So shout out to you, Dr. Abate. A lengthy conversation on taxes. You still, of course, taxes making the headlines this morning. If you look at Ekiti State, I put up Ekiti State in particular, their internally generated revenue almost tripling from 2020, about 10 billion to 32 billion in 2024. We have Akintunde Oyebode, who is the Honorable Commissioner of Finance for Ekiti State, later on the Global Business Report. He's joining us to talk about the impact of the tax reforms on state revenues, right? And Taiwo Oyebode was also had another conversation. Taiwo Oyedele had another conversation with CFOs and tax consultants. This is after his presentation at the Senate last week. So I just wanted to get some quick excerpts for you all, because there are some very pertinent things he said. Let's start with the size of the committee and how he says he wants to use the size of the committee to set an example in terms of spending. So listen to that.
So our committee was constituted intentionally to be very diverse and inclusive. We had over 80 members and over 45, actually over 50 people in our secretariat. It wasn't physical. So you won't find one big office. For people that have been to my office in Lagos, say, this is your office, eh? My office is the size of this table. And I said, because we want to lead by example. If we're saying that we need physical discipline, then we should not be wasteful. We did all the work we did without going to any country to understudy them physically, right? And we've understudied many countries. Zoom was doing the magic for us. Send questions, set up a meeting, discuss it, do follow up, instead of carrying 20, 30 people to go to the UK to go and understudy.
Technology, don't you just love it? No need to do any physical understanding and traveling with a delegation. Again, the administration has talked about reducing those amounts. Let's get to the budget. For my brother Rufai, you know, Rufai, we've gone back and forth on this corruption thing. I keep telling you, I keep saying that any corruption is not a silver bullet. So listen to Taiwo Oyedele echo the same sentiments, talking about how Nigeria's budget is just too small.
It's running on a low budget. The entire budget of the federal government and all the states with their local governments, including the amendment to the Appropriation Act to add 6.2 trillion for 2024, is 35.2 for the federal government, 16 trillion for all the states. Total is 51 trillion. Convert to USD is $32 billion. $32 billion is the size of the budget of Kenya, 54 million people. It's less than 1/4 of the budget of South Africa, $130 billion for a little over 60 million people. Even by African standard, we're significantly underperforming. This is not even our revenue, it's our ambitious budget. This budget is not sufficient to cater for transportation infrastructure in Nigeria. Just trying to fix roads, maintain them, do rails, maybe a few airports. This amount is not enough. Corruption is a problem in Nigeria. Waste is, right? I'm not playing down on those. But even if you eliminate those 100%, you have $32 billion, including borrowing. That's all you can spend for more than 200 million people. There's a fundamental problem we must address. How do we get this number to be 150, 200 billion dollars, not 32?
All right, now refunds. How does anybody ever talk about tax refunds in Nigeria, right? In terms of individuals and businesses. Listen to Taiwo Oyedele talk about the need for technology to make it efficient, and listen to how he praises the government of Rwanda and their tax authority in this regard.
Businesses carry the burden of VAT. We've discussed that. Small businesses have smaller thresholds, so they have the burden. We've raised it. With our threshold, 97% will no longer have to worry about VAT. VAT refund takes forever. I spent over 20 years in the private sector doing consulting. I got tax refund only once in my entire career. In South Africa, you get refunds in 72 hours. All right? They proudly put the number of hours there. It's too embarrassing to put it in days. 3 days. In Rwanda, you get it before you apply. They just see your account and they see that your input is more than your, they credit you. Yeah, they just like, it must be that you are asking us to pay you, but you haven't had the time to ask. Yes. I'm extremely proud of Rwanda. They're the most impressive of all the countries, including foreign countries. Of all the countries we understudied, Rwanda Revenue Service is the most impressive. The way those guys use data is unbelievable. They even have how they categorize taxpayers. So this default payment is level A. So if you're a very compliant taxpayer, you get refund before you ask for it. And I think we can do that in Nigeria. Let's reward doing the right thing.
Let's reward doing the right thing and reward taxpayers. Finally, Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Olayemi Cardoso, of course, we covered this live. He was at the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria dinner. And, you know, subsidies again. He actually this time said that FX subsidies, remember that three-headed dragon I showed you last week, FX, fuel, and electricity. Olayemi Cardoso said we spent about 6.2 trillion in terms of the revenue loss to Nigeria on FX subsidies as opposed to 4.5 trillion on fuel subsidies in 2022.
2022 alone, the potential revenue loss due to a less flexible FX regime was approximately 6.2 trillion naira compared to 4.5 trillion from fuel subsidies. I.e., we have all been complaining about the loss to governors, to the government, federal government's coffers from the fuel subsidy. Yet, the subsidy and the losses from the FX regime that we used to have in the past far exceeded that of the fuel. The real elephant in the room was the losses coming from the FX regime.
That is our update for this Money Monday.
Okay, so two things. Number one, Mr. Cardozo too, please should also calculate for us, since they floated the Naira and they removed subsidy, how much loss it has done and damage it has done to the economy in terms of monetary terms in the trillions. Because, like you know, by your training as an economist, you see something called opportunity cost. You should calculate for us. With a GDP of over 300 or something billion, it has gone down to about 200 billion now. They should also calculate for us how much loss that has happened in opportunity cost for this economy. And Rotus, I think we should also have put in our story today that Holchem has left the country. They've sold it over to a Chinese cement firm. I'm talking about the Lafarge group. You know, Holchem, the Swiss group, has left, and they sold it over to a Chinese cement firm. Secondly, as regards to Oyede's tax policies,
but their stake, Rufai, they sold their stake.
Yes, no.
So they're still, the company is still here. They just sold.
Yeah, but they sold it over to a Chinese. Is that not the same thing I said? Has Holchem not left? Has Holchem not left the country? Has Holchem not left? Yeah. So what are you saying? As I was saying, as regards Taiwo Oyedele, fantastic job Taiwo Oyedele has done. You get. But let's also not mitigate the role of corruption. I also go back to the narrative about opportunity cost. Yes, the budget is small, but do you make the revenue that is commensurate? What makes you not make that revenue? Is it not corruption in the first place? And speaking about opportunity cost, he was talking about a $32 billion budget, probably a couple of trillions here and there. But he was talking about fixing the transport infrastructure. I've got news for Taiwo Oyedele. And what part Taiwo Oyedele didn't say is this. Mr. Umahi says to fix all the roads in this country will cost 15 trillion. Why did Mr. Umahi go and start a new coastal road with that same 15 trillion? Probably if we had prioritized opportunity costs, fix all the pre-existing roads with that 15 trillion, look for it, get it anyway, rather than going to start a new coastal road for that 15 trillion, probably would have made a dent. So our budget has always been small. We have always wriggled our way around it. But the accountability at which you spend the money is the bigger problem. And please don't delude yourself. You will never have a budget of $100 billion in the next 1 year like South Africa. I think you should also tell them the revenue South Africa is making.
All right, let me talk about Trump and tariffs. So last week, we talked about his threatening to impose increased tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada and conversations around that. Now he's saying that no longer will he watch or sit and BRICS countries trying to move away from the dollar, that period is over. He's going to give them 100% tariff. But of course, when you investigate tariffs and who bears the burden of tariffs, even though he has consistently maintained the fact that tariffs are borne by, it has no implications or tax or burden on the American consumers. But economic experts who have studied his first administration when he also introduced tariffs, increase in tariffs, noted that at the end of the day, American consumers actually bore the burden of those increased tariffs because it is the important organization that are based in the United States that end up paying the tariffs on these goods. So even though he's coming out to say that he's going to tariffs, increase tariffs, give tariffs, put on tariffs, burden of tariffs on companies or countries or goods coming from particular countries, it's now clear that the American people might suffer for this. So he has to be a bit careful about his this war or this waging a war or a tariff war on goods and services from countries that he seems that wants to show or demonstrate Americans' power or dominance in that space. I think that's very important, and he's been going on about this from last year. Canada has responded, Mexico has responded, a number of countries are coming out to say that actually that's not the way forward, and America would actually also be affected if he goes or decides to toe that line.
Okay, immediately President Trump won the American election. There was what we called the Trump trade and its effect. And we saw the effect in the markets in the US. All the stocks did very well. Even Bitcoin shot through the roof. Bitcoin has done 2 consecutive months of excellent performance, almost looking at the $100,000 target. But the big elephant in the room is on the international stage, where Trump threatened a flat 25% on any import into the United States and threatening Mexico and also Canada, forcing Prime Minister Trudeau to go physically to Florida to see him, and the Mexican president also saying, look, they will also retaliate. The EU, there's also the EU saying there will be retaliatory tariffs in the same way that China is saying they too have the capacity to retaliate. International relations, international trade not being a one-way traffic, and that's why we have the World Trade Organization. Now Trump is threatening the BRICS and the other countries that have tried to join. I think in total about 19 countries, including Brazil, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, and other countries, South Africa, that have joined. Russia also. He says he will impose 100% tariffs. If they come up with an alternative international financial system, which does not use the dollar, but that remains to be seen. Trump will have to fight many fights, many battles. Climate change, BRICS, and now the Lobito corridor that President Biden is trying to work on in, Southern African axis, the Angolan axis, the transportation, also to fight China and Russia. Will he sustain it? Many of these things will remain to be seen when he assumes office in less than 2 months, effectively on January 20. In other news, we're expecting November jobs report by Friday. November jobs report in October, we were told 20,000 jobs were created. But that was because of the, the hurricanes, Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Mirene, or I think I got the name right, As a result of that, it was just 20,000. But the big issue ahead of us is whether the Federal Reserve would cut rates in December or not. The expectation is that Federal Reserve, U.S. Federal Reserve, will cut rates by about 25 basis points. But the big story again will be when Trump comes in and Trump says, well, he doesn't like the face of Jerome Powell, and he thinks that the Federal Reserve is too independent. Finally, I think it's good that you brought that bit about Oyedele, Taiwo Oyedele, and the dimensions of the 4 VAT bills. I said earlier, before you joined us, that the big problem we have, I think I've used the word big too frequently this morning, but that just shows the seriousness of the subjects that you have brought. He is saying that, look, how I said earlier, that the issues surrounding the VAT bills is mischief and ignorance. That is what the Tinubu government must use political intelligence to address, to carry everybody along, to ensure inclusion, and to, ensure that ignorant people do not go about commenting on bills that they have not read, commenting on ethnic comments from whether Northern Youth Forum or from some other persons who we don't even know whether they are the true representatives, or not. That clarity is important. I repeat, I think that the tax reform is important, but the people need to be carried along, and the consultation to be transparent and accountable. Thank you very much.